Welcome back. As you can see, we've got the unit in front of us. I have a small confession to make. I haven't been able to get these ready in time for my Test of Honour game. But fortunately, and in a weird sort of coincidence of scheduling, I've got another game in a couple of days. And to be honest, I've not had a game for months, and in two within about 4 days. So we're going to try and get these ready for part two. Just thought I'd sort of highlight where we are with some of these guys. There's that sort of patterned effect that we've created on the front of the sort of waistcoat, surcoat effect here, or effort here. We've got the underside, sorry, we've got the base coating of the lacing done on these, and I've also run round on the troops that have got lacing and done the same on here. This is a bit more subtle, and this is the actual moss colour that I'm doing. So what I'm going to do now is just try and do the upper coats and the lacing. So I'm just going to grab out of the paints box. I think what I'll do is try this one first. So I'll just retrieve the next in the sequence, which for me, because I'm trying to go for a very distinct and different sort of colour, is the Foundry 20 series. And I'm going to try the deep blue parts C version in the Triad. This one I'm going to pop into a little tin there, or a little paint receptacle. I'm going to get grab a new cocktail stick. Just shaking the pot off camera, and then we'll get this stirred up. A little bit popped in here. Again, we really don't need much because we're only going to do one set of lacing, so that will be more than enough. Just pop the lid back on, put it away. So this is the bit that's the trickier bit, and I'm going to try and do this and keep the figure in focus at the same time. But what we're trying to do here is just pick out the raised sections on the lacing, and if it becomes more of a dotted effect, that's absolutely fine. Okay. Sometimes, depending on what colour you've chosen, this will be more stark than perhaps is coming over on the camera, but I'm still getting enough of a difference here to make me pleased with the result, because bear in mind we've obviously got a little bit of highlighting still to do on the armour. And again, I'm not sure if it's clear on the camera. This figure has got sort of sections of the lacing that are slightly more proud of the figure than others, and those are the bits that I'm trying to concentrate on for this sort of approach. So I'm going to carry on doing that with all of those, with all of the blue lacing, and then I'll join you shortly. Right, whilst I'm in the mood for doing some of these lace patterns or lacings, what we'll do now is we'll do the white on this one. So again, this is a Foundry Triad. I'm going to use the top Triad in the white, giving this more of a shake. And I definitely want to give this one, a stir with a cocktail stick. And this one, you're perhaps going to see more of the dotted effect. So bear in mind, I've used the base coat of the Triad again here, and we're trying to go the top coat. And there's a couple of sections on here already that I'm not entirely chuffed with in terms of how I've sort of put the paint on the undercoat. But I don't know if you can see that, but we're already getting a bit more of an effect of the sort of contours, if you like, of the lacing coming out. Apologies, this is a little bit awkward the way I'm holding it. I may have to go back and revisit some of this because I'm not entirely chuffed with that as an effect, but we'll carry on going. And I suppose the thing to point out is that at no point are we constrained by being unable to sort of rectify any errors, if you see what I mean. And I'm definitely not doing as good a job on this one as I'd hoped. Okay. Yeah, definitely room for improvement there, Alan. Okay. All right. I'll have to make do with that one for a minute. I think I'll be doing a bit of tidy up actions on that one. So I'm going to carry on now and do the same thing for the moss figures. Sorry about the glare there. This is the Foundry moss. I used the 29A on the figures in the sort of Bandit batch, if you like, that do have some lacing. And there's only 2 figures. So again, same principle. We'll get some the top coat in the Triad in the paint pot. We'll try and make a better job of this. And it is all to do with where you're putting your hands and a sort of arrangement that works for you, if you see what I mean. And I'm doing a half sort of dot and half drag down the figure, hoping to pick out the high pieces of the lacing. So clearly there you can see the difference between the section that I've dotted and the section I haven't dotted. You can go straight to this in one go if you wish, but I do find that occasionally doing this slightly lighter colouring or less stark colouring just gives you a little bit of a help in hand when it comes to putting on the lacing afterwards. And if I've got any sections where I feel like I've been too heavy with the lacing, you can reduce it down again with that base coat just to take the edge off, or worst case go back to the original armour base coat, if that makes sense. But as long as you can get an approximate job on the lacing, we're not going to be too silly or too out of kilter when we come to look at the finished figure from tabletop distance. So again, I'm going to carry on running around like that. And what I have a tendency to do is when, excuse me, when I get to the end of this process, if there's certain areas that I think, do you know what, that's just too much lacing effect, I will line it in with the base coat on the armour. And also at this point, even though I've put a second coat on the armour, you can see that really we need to be lifting that again. Otherwise we're going to end up with a very sort of almost silly effect here on this lacing. But I'm just going to have a quick look here, because what we should have done is picked out some of this as well. So I'm just going to lighten that up with a bit of a sort of dry brush effect. That starts to pick that section of the lacing out. And I can see part of my problem at the moment is that this paint is drying too quickly, so I'm going to have to do a bit of cleaning of the brush. I'm going to give the little pot here a stir, because this is very thick, this paint, and I think that's part of the problem that we're having. Okay, so let's carry on and do a little bit more. And as far as you're able, what we're trying to do here is get an even finish with the same amount of paint on each of the sections and the same amount of gapping between them. And then we'll just pick out a little bit of the lacing in there, like I did before. It really is today seemingly quite thick today, this paint. Okay. Okay. Fortunately for that one, that's pretty much done. So let's just do this guy as well for completeness. And actually think I've got the edge of the armour there, so I shall be going back round that one and sorting that out. I think of all of the figures that I've painted over the years, Samurai are probably the ones where I'll do the most corrections. But it always tends to be, thankfully, small pieces here and there, and it can make quite a bit of difference just doing the odd tidy up. I'm really struggling with this paint drying too quickly tonight. Must have it too warm in here. Okay. Just finish around the front. Okay. Gonna have to put a little bit of water in this paint, I think, actually. Otherwise we're just not going to finish this job. Put that up. Sometimes it can be very confusing as to where armour begins and lacing starts, or vice versa. But as I said, if you can follow general principle that you're going to put the lacing in a particular pattern and you can stick to it, you can end up with something that doesn't look too silly in regards to the overall effect. And before we finish this video, I'll show you some shots of samurai armour, and then maybe that will help reassure you that what we're doing here isn't too far off the mark. And this figure is definitely not as easy to follow in terms of the sculpting. As I said, if you can get that sort of lining effect from a distance, we won't go too far wrong with that one. And I think I'll just do a little bit of tidying up on him and we'll be fine. It is making me query or question my sort of choice of white lacing on a black armour base though. Well, not white lacing, but very light lacing, we say. So I think if I had my time again, I might be doing that in like a dark green or something similar. But for now, we'll leave those as they are. And what I'm going to quickly do is do the surcoat on this fella with the moss B shade in the triad, just to see what this looks like, or start to look. We'll get more of an impression of what this is going to look like as a finished article, as it were. And apologies, I'm slightly going back to front here in the way I would normally paint. That's just to try and keep as much of this in video as possible. If I go too badly wrong, I'll stop. Yeah, we're just trying to pick out the high areas on the model. Again, combination of high areas on the model and what actually looks sensible as you're painting. Okay. Here we go. Keep going with this one. What I'm hoping is as we add more of these colours, we start to get a feel for how the model is going to look as a finished article, and then it will help reinforce the choices that we've made, or that you've made, sorry, around coat colours, armour, that sort of thing. And sometimes you just have to keep going and do the next few colours before you know whether that colour you used sort of 3 sections before actually works. And obviously it's a lot easier if you're painting figures with effectively a uniform or a constrained palette. And when people talk about speed painting, as I've said earlier, apart from technique that you get used to, speed painting for me is about choice of palette as much as anything else, so that you kind of get into the zone, as it were, get into a particular sort of pattern, and that can actually be very quick. Here we go. Okay, so actually, don't know what it's looking like on the video, but again, not too shabby as far as it goes. What I'm going to do now, before I finish too much more, is I'm going to put the gold straps on, and then we'll come and have a little look at the flesh tones and finish that off. So I'm just going to grab a gold and I'll join you shortly. Okay, so this one is one I've not used before. This is actually an Army Painter bright gold, and we'll see what this looks like. Yeah, that's bright. And that's no bad thing for this sort of miniature. So let's get this guy here. Move this one out of the way. So what I'm going to do on this one is do the braiding on this sort of helmet tassels and tie. But we're also going to do this upper piece here. We're already lifting the miniature considerably just with this. Not sure if this should be gold down the side of his armour tassels, but do you know what? It's going to be gold now. Most of it's obscured by his beard, but we're just going to run down, and there you go. So a couple of other things. Obviously we need to do the reverse of the helmet here, where the horns show, those horn effect show. And the other thing I tend to do is the sword guards. I'll do a little run of gold around there as well. Okay. Okay. So again, getting there with that one. Do the same thing on this one. And again, the brown that we've used as a sort of base coat here really helps to bring out the gold. And if we just left it with the black, that would have been a pretty disappointing finish compared to just putting that additional base coat on and lightening it a little bit. Okay. So next stages then. I think what I might do is just concentrate on finishing these guys a little bit. So I'm going to do the face colours now. So we'll get the next one in the triad for the face colour, or the flesh colour, sorry. And then we'll do these two guys and work our way around the lesser quality troops. So just by way of a reminder, What I'm using is the Foundry Triad. I darkened the A base, the A shade in the Triad with a little bit of dusky flesh, and that was purely because I wanted a slightly bolder differentiation between that Triad and this one. I'm going to show some bad habits again by using, actually, do you know what, I'm not going to use the paint straight out the lid because we really shouldn't be doing that. I'm going to get another little tin receptacle, give it a proper stir, and then pop some paint in there. Again, we won't need too much because we haven't got a huge number of figures to do, but we are going to need more because of the amount of flesh on the troops behind. I'll just pop that lid back on. Now what I'm going to do is start with this guy, and this is probably going to be quite difficult to do on camera, but what I'm trying to do now is I've got the base coat of the flesh on, I've got the eyes painted, so what I'm going to try and do is lift the facial features by popping a little bit of the higher, lighter colour onto things like the nose, the cheekbones, maybe one of the lips, if I can sensibly navigate to that using the brush. As I said, when the figure starts to have a helmet, moustache, etc., that can be fairly challenging. But just a reminder, you're only trying to get the bits that are prominent. I'm not trying to repaint the whole figure here, just the bits that give the face some definition from a distance. That's it. Now, I'm not sure what you can see there, but that's just enough to lift the figure. I'm going to have a little look at that section under the helmet, and it looks good to me. So it's going to become a little bit more obvious when we start doing that on more figures, particularly the ones with more of their face showing. But again, just start on the nose, cheekbones, maybe the face, around the chin, come down there a little bit, not too much. And that's probably enough, to be honest. So let's do a figure with a little bit more in terms of flesh showing. And where it's got a bridge across the nose, can put a little bit of highlighting in there. Sorry, a little bit of lightening in there. We've still got a highlight to consider a bit later on, if we want to do that. But we're going to go around the ears, up the chin there. I want to make sure people can see the areas of the flat face that we're picking out with this technique. And again, if you can't get to all of those areas, just put a little dot or go into the middle of it. Haven't talked about hands, but hands I'm going to do back to front, because what I would normally do is drag across from the rear of the hand to the front, but for me I'd have it the other way round. That's not going to work if I'm trying to show you on camera, so I'll just try and recreate this at an odd angle. And what we're trying to do there is bring out the effect of the fingers. Now, they say a bad workman blames his tools, but this sculpting is not as distinct as I'd like on the fingers. We're going to have to work a bit harder at bringing those out. Okay, that's not too bad. And I think I've shown you painting before in terms of the musculature of a figure, but I tend to follow that as a base principle when I'm painting flesh on any sort of larger sections of exposed flesh. And again, trying to sort of think about where the muscles show is one aspect of it, but it's again what looks realistic on the figure. We're following round here that sort of definition line there around the bicep, and then we'll go up to the forearm and sort of curve around like that. Paint's drying fast again. Okay, so let's not forget the chin. Sorry, the neck, under the chin, around there. And if we go into this section here by the armour, that's fine. Same kind of principle down here. Just leave a little bit of line to indicate the muscle, the tendons. And the fingers on this side are a lot more prominent, as you can see, and therefore easier to sort of cover off. That's the top of the hand, the knuckles there, so we'll just run the brush like that. Good, okay. I thought for a minute I was going to have a bad painting session tonight, but this one is giving me a little bit more confidence in terms of where we are. I suppose that's a good point, really. If you come out here or you go to your normal sort of painting location and things just aren't working for you, just take a break, have a cup of tea, whatever, and just come back when you've had a chance to get that case of the painting jitters, or whatever you want to call it, out of your system. Obviously, if you've been doing a lot of painting, it may just be a little bit of muscle fatigue, because sometimes it can be a bit tricky holding figures in fixed positions, especially when you're doing, you know, quite a bit of detailed work. I tend to do the knees as almost a sort of oval or round, and then go in round the base, occasionally catch the side, but there's a distinct kneecap here that you can see modelled on the figure, so we'll try and bring that out. Just a hint of going under the kneecap there. And then I'm always forgetting the feet, so in this particular case we've actually got some toes, so you can just drag the brush across the toes to pick them out, that's fine. A little bit of flesh poking through these sort of sandal effect. That's actually a brown strap which is going to be highlighted later. So do you know what, I mean, I've just taken the headset off, but you know, that's actually improved that figure immeasurably. Really not happy with the lacing that I've done on this guy, so I can feel a little bit of work on that, maybe even a little light wash to take the edge off of that. But in terms of the flesh, not bad. So I'm going to carry on doing that to all of these lower class ones with more flesh on display, and then come back and show you. Okay, so welcome back. I've painted now the mid coat on these on the flesh for these figures at the back. I thought it was actually high time that I talked to you about the type of effect that I'm trying to achieve on these figures, in particular with the lacing. So let's just pop the camera up a little bit. I've got quite a few reference books, but one of the ones I'd recommend is this one. This is I'm just trying to look at the publication here. Zeughaus Verlag Publishing. I think I picked up mine. I'm pretty sure you can pick them up from normal places like Amazon, Kaliva Books, probably a range of other suppliers. I think I picked mine up at the Wargame show. But I thought it was probably just best to explain about what I mean by when I say we're trying to achieve a dotted effect. So this is obviously a picture, and apologies if you're getting a bit of gloss and feedback, sort of glare there. But as you can see here, we've got lacing going through segments of the armour. So what we're trying to do on our figures is kind of dot to follow that sequence along. And we should still see predominantly armour, and the lacing should be there, but not dominating. So when I'm looking at, when I'm looking at this figure, for example, you know, we're getting just a massive white lacing. It's too much for that figure, and I think the white lacing is too stark. To be honest, I don't think I've used another figure where I've got white lacing, because I do like to try and have it blend in a little bit more in the figure. And again, I'm a little bit worried that we can't see the dotting here on this figure. So basically, I'm going to have a little look at all the lacing with a more critical eye, and these guys in particular, very, very much not happy with that. So I picked up some of my original sort of Perry figures, and yes, the lacing is there, but we're still getting quite a lot of blue effect, and from Wargames distance, that's just about the right sort of effect. We're not getting this. Excuse me, I'll just put this back down again. Yeah, we're not getting such an in-your-face sort of drowning out the other colours. So what I thought I'd do for the lower class troops, I've not been happy with my base coating on them at all, full stop. So I'm going to get a black wash, and I'm just going to run over the bottom sections here with a black wash, and again looking to just tone down the lacing, but also to give us that better definition that I'm looking for. And I'm not prepared to kind of compromise on the overall look of it. It's all very well saying that you'll speed paint it, but you know, at the end of the day, we've got a game with these figures. Or you want to game with the figures. And if you're looking at it over multiple games, you'll think, why didn't I do it differently? Well, the best time to make those adjustments is now. So what I want to do is try and accentuate the black armour underneath, reduce the effect of the lacing, and bring it more back to that sort of dotted style. Now that sort of lacing that I've shown you on that other picture, that is a simpler lacing when armour starts to become, I was going to say mass produced, but I don't think that's fair. When you look at earlier pictures, and I'll show you an example from a museum shortly, they accentuate the lacing, whereas what you tend to find with the later suits of armour is they were a lot more functional and gave a lot more prominence to the actual armour pieces, and they kept things as a consequence a lot simpler. And yes, there was an element of mass production, because the Ashigaru, or lighter troops, were also equipped as much as possible with armour, and obviously the manufacturing standards were lowered consequently because of that. You really shouldn't be fearful of putting a black wash on. If it's a decent one, it will do the job that you're looking for. I don't know what it is, but as I said before, psychologically I tend to try and rest the figure down when I do that sort of effect. Oh, that's probably going to shine like crazy, isn't it, on the camera? So let's put something else under there that perhaps won't be quite as I think the answer's there already. So I'm only going to do that to these two, the ones where I've got the lacing that I'm not particularly chuffed with, for now anyway. And we'll see what effect that has. see if it tones it down enough. If it doesn't, I will change the colour. But I'm not a great fan of washes over the whole figure. As I said, it tends to sort of collect in the wrong places, look a bit dirty at times. But if you're using it in a focus way, on sort of sections of armour in particular, I'm actually quite a fan. And if we just get that section going there, put that in there. You notice the brush isn't particularly the world's best brush. This is an old one I tend to use for undercoating, etc. Maybe that's not such a good idea on these sort of more detailed sections, but we're getting away with it. There, okay. So again, I'm quite happy with that. Do I want to take a look at any of the others? Probably not. It may be a bit subtle, but we are getting a nice sort of colour differentiation there. And I don't feel the need to particularly over egg it, and it won't hurt to have a bit more difference in terms of the armour style and colours. So what do I want to do about this one? Do I do the same thing here is a question that I've got in mind. And I think I was tempted to do a blue wash, but I think I will do a black, just on the grounds that okay, I'm already regretting that. So I'm not going to do that on there because the colour, the black wash on that colour is just not right. So we'll take most of that off. And instead what I'll do is I'll return to the base coat and just reduce the effect of this white lacing a little bit. So I now need to let that dry. So we'll come back to that one shortly, and we'll let those dry. Do I want to do anything to this one? I think what I'm going to do on this one is just get the base coat and just try and again get in so that you can see some of the plate effects. So that is something we can do now whilst we're waiting for the rest of that to dry. So back shortly. Right, so it's the 37A of the Triad. Again, I've had to change the top because I had that normal sort of splitting thing that occurs. And let's move that up to one side. So what I'm going to try and do here is just go back into some of the darker areas on the model. Try and concentrate on getting a little bit in there. Now I'm actually going against the sculpting here, but I think in terms of overall effect, just taking the edge off of it is going to be what I want. I'm trying to go a little bit careful for obvious reasons. Just get more of a broken up effect on that lacing so that it's not so dominant in the way that I've done it. Even though, as I say, you can clearly see that I've picked out the lacing in the right areas. It's just not the effect I'm looking for at this stage. I want to get it much more subtle than that. Do a bit up there to try and darken off that section. Okay. And apologies, I'm trying to use my favoured sort of left to right drag across motion and then get in. If I've gone over a bit there, that's fine. I've just gone a bit too exuberant with the top or the mid coat there, and also with the amount that I was doing in terms of lacing. And do you know what? It's always good on a video to show a bit of warts and all. And to be honest, this isn't too bad, because once you get the sort of brush going in the right direction, as it were, just keep, just layering it across like that is not actually that difficult. This hand's aching though because I'm holding it at a funny angle. Excuse me. A little bit flicking on there. Okay, this is all about just taking the edge off for me. Making sure people know and can visualize the predominant armour colour. And these are a lot more dense, so a little bit of care here. It's required. I hope I haven't put too many of you off with this. That this is just about me wanting to create a figure that I'm happy with. Clearly you'll want to do the same, but I am a bit disappointed with this one compared to how well I found this experience in the past. So I think the message for painting session so far is make sure you undercoat properly and keep the lacing a little bit toned down, as it were, even if the model itself is encouraging you to go a bit harder or a bit stronger, as it were. Okay, and again, what I'm looking for is how that is going to be viewed on the tabletop. I don't mind people picking up my figures and having a good old squint at them, but basically they're designed for tabletop miniatures, and that's the sort of effect that we're trying to go for. I think the camera here is probably doing a great job at highlighting some of my faux pas. So what we're going to do now, that wash here has had a little bit of time to dry, is I'm going to pick out the base coat of the teal, which was a Foundry 24A, give it a shake, and we're going to try and line in around those sort of lacing effect that I've put on there, and hopefully we can improve matters a little. Of course, this is the paint that was quite noticeably thick, so that's not going to help, but we'll do our best here with a receptacle, and I'll probably use it straight off that. You can see how thick that is. I have watered it down already and shaken it. Obviously more work is required. Just see how we get on with it in its current raw form. Okay, and do you know what? Given that that's only been a tiny little bit of tidying up, just reducing the impact of that white and getting a little bit more colour in there. Of course, I've now gone over a little bit of white lacing. Has made me feel a lot better about life in general on that one. I'm not so concerned about the helmet, but we will have a little go at that. Just in a couple of sections. And I think just reducing that spread a little bit, it's going to make me feel a little bit better about this model. Prevent any sort of drastic measures being applied. Okay, let's have another look at the front again. So there's one little section that I've got to redo. I want to make sure that we're getting consistent levels on that lacing, which means I need to bring that up a little bit. Yeah, and I think just one little pick of lacing, and that one might be a keeper. Okay. Right. I have noticed as well, by just picking up that figure, that I didn't do the mid coat or the mid colour, mid shade in that triad on the bottom armour. So we'll rectify that now. If I can retrieve the paint pot. I did have all these nicely ordered, and then I've moved it at the box a couple of times to play the game that I was late for. And now, of course, they're all out of sequence. I'm sure we can find it. There we go. So just for completeness, what we're doing here is just putting the same sort of banding and strapping and sort of contouring, if you like, or creating a definition on this armour at the bottom of the miniature. We'll pick out the raised areas, corners of things like these knee guards or the knee guard, and then you can't see so much banding on this one, but I'm going to create my own banding. I'm just picking out the edge, a couple of strips down the front. So a bit like that, if you can see that. So we'll just do the other one. Yeah. And for what it's worth, I'll just put a little bit on the edge there, but only a little bit, just to pick that out. Okay. Okay, you can certainly overthink this sort of thing. I'm just wondering about a little edge down there. Okay, I think that's probably enough in terms of highlighting. So I'm just going to do that one little sort of white section on the lacing, but I'm going to choose one of the slightly darker versions of the Triad just to keep the impact of that a bit lower. So what I'm going to do is retrieve the midpoint, the mid-tone in the sequence of the Triad, the 33B, and just use that on that one that I managed to overpaint. Okay. Yeah, and do you know what? From tabletop distance, again, not too bad. I think if I had my time again, we would not be using a white lacing. I might use a red or a green even. Just something that you could see, but not perhaps overly dominate the finished effect. Yeah, and I think it will improve a little bit as I start to paint some of the other colours. So just while we're in the midst of painting these samurai style figures, what I'm going to do is pick out the final top coat in the storm blue Triad to paint the tunic and the trousers on this figure. And again, because this is effectively a highlight colour, you don't normally have to pick out too much. However, this Triad is prone to darkness, shall we say, and I tend to be a little bit heavier with any highlighting on this Triad compared to some of the others. And it does dry darker, as they all do in this sequence. It's still a blue-grey, but I always tend to find that this feels a lot nicer when you get to this stage, because you can start to see the true effect of the sort of Triad approach. And again, just for speed really, I'm not going to worry too much about patterning here. And to be quite frank as well, the model has to be right for it to work. And had I painted the trousers in perhaps a different colour, then maybe I would have considered it, because I'd have had room to pattern those. Okay, so starting to get there. So we'll put those to one side. Let's have a little look at these guys. So not terrible, but I think what I've done on the other figures there with the lacing is still merited on this one. I've still got two bigger or stark clashing type contrast compared to what I'm after. So I'm going to get one of the blacks, and it'll be a Vallejo black that I normally use. Let's get a pot to use. I'm not going to use the black grey. I'm sure I've got a couple of the Vallejo blacks around. Okay, this is the only one that comes to hand at the moment. This is a slightly older pot, this one. Nevertheless, it's still got some good painting. So again, just been a little bit conscious of the the effect of the lacing. And weirdly, because the lacing went into the recess, there's an argument for not following a natural line and going into the recess with this paint. However, it is by far and away the easiest way to tidy up the figures if you do that. Okay. Okay. What I want to do is get rid of any of these big areas of dominating. Okay. Maybe making that look a little bit dirty, but if I get too fed up in a minute, I'll just repaint the whole lot and start again. Yeah. So keep looking at it through the headset. What have we got there? A little bit. Could be tidied up there. All right. Not brilliant, but tidied up to a fashion. Yeah, and I think actually doing some of the recesses on this armour won't hurt either. It's a very light touch across there. So I'm dragging it that way across the armour, around there, under there. Just really dealing with any sort of excessive and overly large sections. Let's see if I want to do anything more on this one. Yep. Okay. While I'm here, for completeness, might as well do this guy's hair that's been over painted. In this case, it wasn't properly coated in the first place. Okay, it's not terrible. I did notice earlier that this guy has a moustache, so we'll quickly line that in. Okay. Right. Okay. So a bit of a brush clean, and then I'll take stock.